Chapter 8, Kingdom of Fire, Part 3, Finale. A fearful pall had fallen upon the usually stern and level-headed people of the Kingdom of Fire. Whispers of death and the final cycle drifted on the hot winds. Even the kingdom's greatest magician had not been spared. He and several others had been burned within their homes or vanished without a trace. Bloody intrigue was a matter of course among the royalty, but these dark strikes did not hold to accepted norms and traditions, prompting rumors of the volcano's demon having descended to deal dispassionate death among those thought to be its most ardent adherents. There was an uncertainty who to blame. Perhaps the royal uncle had offended his demonic masters, or otherwise failed to fulfill a pledge. Or perhaps the higher powers were displeased with the weak boy who would soon be coronated, and those who ought to have deposed him were now struck down. The people looked for leadership, and in the meantime persevered, as was their nature. Within the great ziggurat were floors only for royalty and their family. The recent purge left them largely unoccupied, and so the uncle of Karna had filled them with his own retinue. Bodyguards, concubines, sycophants, all of them his and his alone, with the inner chambers being closed to all but him and a few dark disciples. There were now new whispers for those ears to hear. Demons spoke of the volcanoes going silent, allowing the realm beyond for millennia averted potential ingress into the kingdom, and so every power possible must be made ready to nullify that inevitable incursion. For the kingdom's preservation, no deed was left unconsidered, no act deemed too profane. This was the obsession which occupied Karna's uncle and plagued his every thought and dream. For the final cycle to occur not from the inevitable, unavoidable great eruption, but by mortal hands. The thought burned his stomach like an ulcer and tore at his mind like a splinter of bone. Thus he was found alone and in a sleep-like trance, until awakened by the words, "Perhaps I judged thee too harsh." Wakefulness rushed back to him and he sprung to his feet, bronze sword already in hand. "But," continued the voice from beyond the gossamer blinds to his bed, "intending salvation by pledging to hell." A dark figure moved through the light. "I could sympathize were it only your soul to be damned." He swung his heavy blade at the figure, cutting through the thin stuff around his bed and slicing into the shadow. The sound of a rapid, shallow clatter upon the stone floor, and he pulled away his bronze hilt, the blade having been completely shorn off. A flawless double edge of steel reached through the cut gossamer, its threat explicit. Cold blue eyes stared in from the darkness. "Twisted and dark your soul may now be," spoke the pale-faced shadow, "but principled you are. Out of courtesy I ask, will you stand before your king, admit your treason, and place yourself at his mercy?" Dark and brooding figures hardened at the mere notion. "My weak nephew would have offered me such a choice, and for that I would kill him. But you have whispered dreams into his ears and stoked a fire in his heart. Now the molten bronze of our dynasty begins to stir in his veins. I am undone, and could contribute only division." This utterance washed over him and seemed to lift a great weight from his shoulders. His chin jutted, defiant and certain, and he stood tall. "Slay me now, that I may be swiftly forgotten, and so conspirators will fear the king." The stoic shadow nodded in acknowledgement. "I will pray for your soul." He shook his head. "It is lost. Pray my nephew will never lose his." A short inclination of the head, and the greatsword was swung. Karna had dreaded his official coronation. There was little in his life he did not dread, but his desperate prayers had been answered, and a flicker of hope had been granted to him. It was enough to begin to light his way. For the first time in his life, he did not fear to step forward. The coronation began. The priest called to the new king. Karna appeared, ascended, and sat upon the throne. Between archaic recitations, The baritone choir issued their age-old greeting to the king, the assertion of the kingdom, and the acknowledgement of death, the cycles, and the final end. During this, Karna was first crowned, then given the black stone, and finally the bronzed skull of his father was placed above the throne, where it would remain enshrined for the duration of his rule. Finally, Karna was bid by the priest to stand, be acknowledged, and give his first decree. At this moment there was a disturbance at the back of the assembly. The already austere environment seemed to grow more still and silent. Perhaps it was Karna's young imagination, but it felt as if the air cooled. Involuntarily, he gripped the arms of his throne with hopeful expectation. The crowd parted, perhaps moving aside in fear, for in the coronation's hall's entryway was a tall, lean figure clad head to foot in black, face pale beyond what seemed human. And under his arm was carried the severed head of Karna's treacherous uncle. The man in black strode forward, black-booted footfalls silent on the warm stones, unconcerned with the crowd as it recoiled in fear and rumbled with whispers. Most present half convinced he was a demon descended from the mountains, come to collect the due owed by Karna's uncle. Halfway from the throne, the man stopped and, with a casual underhand, threw the head low and forward so it rolled to the floor of the stairs before the king. "My work here is complete," the figure proclaimed, his voice low and cold yet filling the room with ease. He turned and left as he had come, never to be seen again.